Welcome to the SharpRank Pro Interview series. Each week we will highlight a Sharp listed on our site and cover topics at the intersection of sports and gambling.
This week we have Ben Hoffman from the New York Times. Let's do this.
All right, we are live, joined in by Ben Hoffman from the New York Times. I'm Chris, your host here at SharpRank, one of the co-founders. Welcome, Ben. Thanks for taking some time to speak with us.
Oh, absolutely. Anytime.
Yeah, this is very, very exciting. You have quite a few fans on our site, not just from a sports picking aspect, but they got to know you through finding you on our site and then out to your social media and really like the balance between sports and, we're pulling back the curtain on some family life stuff, which I don't know, I'm a big fan of, and so are some other folks on our site.
Yeah.
So why don't we start with kind of like a very tall building elevator pitch of where you got to and how you got to be doing what you're doing.
Yeah, it's I wouldn't say there's like one path to the New York Times, but even in a pretty strange workplace, my path was not straight by any means. I got into working in art departments at newspapers, from designing punk band flyers in college.
Whoa. Where'd you go to school?
Humboldt State. It's a
Okay.
tiny little college in California.
Okay,
And
cool.
so I designed the flyers for all the local bands. I would paste them up all over town. That led to a job in an art department at the local paper. Then I moved down to the Bay Area, worked in the art department there, and sort of built through that, and ended up getting to the Times doing graphic design work and art, and just talked sports with the sports editors. Just all the time, just whenever in between stuff, we'd just be chatting. And, one day, one of the editors just is like, "Hey, do you ever write?" And I'm like, "Professionally? No." And he's like, "Cool. You want to write about minor league baseball?" And so I started writing about minor league baseball, and it built out from there, where I started picking up some sort of like stats-based articles. And then more and more of that, then started doing some game coverage and features, and eventually analysis of games and drafts, like specifically drafts, because nobody I worked with was interested in the draft of any sport. So
that
it ended up being
changed,
weird.
huh?
Yeah. So it was this weird niche at my office that I was able to step into. And then that ended up with me moving over to the sports department full time as an editor and writer, and sort of going from there. And now my job is it's sort of all over the place. I'm both the planning editor for the sports department, so sort of like the general direction of the sports section, and I've been managing baseball as the editor of that, while also writing about football, baseball, and basketball.
Okay.
So it's not, nobody else really, the combination of editing and writing is not particularly common once you get to the level of the Times. Generally, you're very specialized. And so I'm not. They have me do lots of things because it's just sort of worked out where I can sort of plug a lot of gaps in the way we do things. And so that versatility has sort of been what has led me to where I am.
That's really cool. That's fascinating. And any punk bands from that time, from stapling on telephone poles, that some people might have heard of, or just kind of local things?
People in California would probably have heard of the bands. Like Link 80 was a fairly prominent band at the time that we certainly, and the way we do it is there was a guy in town who pulled down any flyers that got put up. But so a buddy of mine was 6'5", and I would sit on his shoulders, and I had a staple hammer. It was this thing, it's like this long. And you just hammer the staples in. And so I put them up like 8 or 9 feet in the air. And they were designed, I knew that I was going to be hanging them that high. So I designed them to be like readable from a distance. and they'd stay up forever because the dude couldn't get them down. And so it's this weird like workaround that we figured out is my buddy Kevin just walking along with me on his shoulders, just hammering stuff up.
Did the guy have any sort of authority, or was he just
No.
like, okay?
No, just some guy in town who enjoyed like taking away people's fun.
Yeah. 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 No one's gonna feel good if I can. That's really funny. Okay, cool. So you've landed at the Times. You're kind of a jack of all trades, and would you say then, were you interested in baseball prior to that minor league introduction, or was that kind of like, sure, whatever?
Well, it's sort of a funny thing is I love sports, even though my peer group was definitely like a super anti-sports crew, like very, very anti, and they always thought it was really weird that I liked it. But I grew up going to games, going to baseball games, just as many as I could, and watching football on TV because I vastly prefer football on television. But so going to Warriors games, going to A's games, and watching the 49ers on TV. And so I always enjoyed it and would read a lot about it, but had very specifically not done it for work. Like I worked hard news for almost my entire career up until the Times. And in fact, when I was asked to work in sports, the conversation was like, "Hey, how do you feel about working in sports?" And I said, "No, thank you." And then the next week, I was working in sports.
Great, we'll put you in sports.
Yeah, but so I was working doing the art, like actually designing the newspaper, the sports section. And so that led to the baseball editor at the time and the weekend editor at the time. Both we sat near each other and we would just chat about sports all day. So yeah, it just worked out in a weird way.
Wow, I'm always so fascinated to hear how people got to where they are, and it's always something like that. You know, obviously some people come out and they're like hard driving, like, I want to cover sports. I want to cover sports. That's all I want to do. But I would say a large majority of them are like, yeah, it was an interest of mine, and I sat next to the sports editor or something along those lines, which is always so fascinating. That's one of the questions I had down here was, you know, did picking games come about just organically, or is it something that you always kind of did and then, oh, I have a platform now, I can use it. So pretty neat, I would say. If you were to pick out a biggest accomplishment or something that you aspire to do in your career professionally, what would that be?
Well, you know, I'd say that like I've gone and covered 11 Super Bowls in person, and each one was like a unique and different experience. And spending the whole week with the teams and turning it, it's not just the game, you know, you spend the whole week leading up to it with the guys. And so that's been a major thing for me. And
do you have a favorite? Do you have a favorite by any chance?
My favorite Super Bowl week was Indy, the Giants Patriots Super Bowl in Indy.
Oh, that's a cool one.
And it was for so many reasons. The Super Bowl cities really vary in how much they want us there, like how much they want the big contingent of media and players and fans there. And Indianapolis was just stoked. They were just like all over it all week. And they had this thing. At first it was kind of annoying, but then it became like this amazing thing is all of the volunteers all over town who are everywhere. They're on every corner. And all of them, if they saw you and knew that you were part of the thing, they'd say, "Have a super day." And I know that sounds like super cheesy and it sounds horrible, but it really was. For the first couple of days, it was like, what are you doing, man? But then the Monday after the game, I went to the airport and somebody handed me one of the volunteers handed me like the Super Bowl pin and just handed it to me. And I looked at him, I'm like, am I supposed to have a super day?
Yeah.
Like, what's going on? But I mean the people were great. Plus Indy is incredibly walkable, which you wouldn't guess. And it was like, everything's really close. Like the media was staying right by the stadium, which was right by where media day was, which was right, like everything was really centralized. And so we all just sort of like, and it was also on the heels of the Dallas Super Bowl, which is the worst one. Like anybody who covers the Super Bowl every year will tell you that the Dallas Super Bowl between, what was that, Steelers and Packers was the worst Super Bowl, at least of the last 20 years. That was just a complete disaster. There was an ice storm in Dallas.
Perfect.
And Dallas
set up for that, so that's good.
Oh yeah, they were telling us on like the Tuesday or Wednesday of that week. They were telling us like, don't worry, some plows are coming to town from Oklahoma.
Oh, great.
we'll get rid of this snow pretty soon. But so on the heels of that, we go to Indy, where everybody's super happy to have us. It's really walkable. The teams were fun because they were kind of snippy with each other. The Patriots and Giants. So that led to a good week. You know, there were some good talkers, which is always a trick with the NFL, is like finding some guys who actually want to talk. But like the Giants had Antrell Roll that year, who was like pretty talkative. And you know, that's still, strangely enough, early enough that some of the Patriots still talked. They hadn't completely locked down
before the muzzles came out.
Yeah, but then we also got a good game out of it. So it was like it was the total package of things. So that definitely was, as far as like weeks of work goes. Like I can't imagine. I mean, even as simple like stupid stuff. Like ESPN had a party that was great. Like Drake played their party that year.
Like yeah, why not? I'm here. I'm in Indianapolis.
Yeah, like Cam Newton was a rookie, I think, and he introduced Drake. And I mean, just such a ridiculous week where like the night sports editor who used to run the Super Bowl for us was just like, yeah, meet me over by Spike Lee. And I'm like, Carl, you're 6'6". Spike Lee is 5'5". You can't give Spike Lee as the way to locate you.
Yeah. Meet me over by Spike Lee is like things I would never expect I could hear in a conversation that includes me, but here we are. So I'd say those are probably, and just you know, being relied upon at work, especially when major like historical figures in sports die. I feel like they've turned to me to be the person who sort of understands the historical relevance of the person. And like sometimes that means editing a story, sometimes that means writing a story. But like when Bart Starr died, Dean Baquet personally reached out, like our executive editor, with like, you know, we need the historical perspective on this guy. And so, you know, I wrote a story that ended up on A1, and it was really gratifying to hear from people in Green Bay, where I'm not from, but just like I'd spent a lot of time listening to Green Bay fans and the way they talked about Starr. And so to hear from Green Bay fans that they felt like I'd really captured it. You know, I'm not an award guy. I don't even put myself up for them and don't really care about them. But like hearing from a former coworker that his mom, who'd gone to every Packers game in the 60s, felt like my Bart Starr story like showed the Bart Starr that she remembered. Like that to me is what I'm going for. Yeah. And that's even more so amplified in Green Bay because of how tight knit that community is. I've been up there for a game, and you're just like walking around a suburban neighborhood. You turn a corner, and like there's the greatest Coliseum in pro football right in front of you.
Absolutely.
It's incredible. I think that was one of my favorite. I go to an away game every year for my home team and just check out a new city. Indianapolis was great too. I mean, it was fantastic city. and very walkable. You're right. That was like something I noticed when I left was like, it's flat, it's wide, it's easy. So cool. So maybe give us something that people who look at you on social media or read your stuff might not know about you, something they might find surprising.
Probably how small of a percentage of my job my writing is. That like I'd say probably 80% of my job is editing and administration. And like things like coordinating with the homepage, coordinating with social media, coordinating with different writers of who's going to do what, and putting it all together, and then actually editing people in the background. And that my writing is like done in the side and always has been. From the start of my writing career, which I probably started writing for the Times about 15 years ago. And from the start, it was always something on the side. And I mean, I've ended up with like more than 2,000 bylines out of it. But it's almost like a hobby, which sounds a little weird. I mean, there's some stuff of it that's a little more like established. Like my Monday morning NFL wrap up is like I feel like I do a really good job at it. I feel like not a lot of people could do it in the speed I do it and the way I do it, and for our audience. Like I think I do a very good job with it, but I think people would be surprised to know that like I probably spend about 20% of my time writing and 80% of my time doing the rest of my job.
Wow. That's very surprising. Just based on your content and the amount of it, finding out that it's that small of a percentage is like shocking. So, well, that's a credit to you though. That's a credit to you for sure. So,
well, no, I love it. And it's something that I wouldn't want to do. And it's when I took my current job, where I got a promotion about a year ago, and when I expressed interest, the sports editor actually said like the thing he was concerned about was that he didn't want to stop having my writing. That he loved the idea of me taking the job, that he thought I'd be great for it, but that basically we needed to find a way to do it where I was still writing. Yeah. And so we sort of carved out, and that's been sort of happening on multiple levels for years. You know, my previous boss sort of envisioned a job for me where I'd be doing a lot of editing at night for live stuff coming in, but that in the time while we were waiting for things, I could be writing. And so he sort of envisioned it that, and my previous boss in the art department was just always freeing me up. Like he understood that sports really liked what I was doing and that they were giving me opportunities. And so he made it a point to, you know, like stuff like Mariano Rivera, when he broke the saves record, they didn't have anybody to cover the game. And so my boss in the art department just found someone to do my job, and I went out to the game and covered the game.
That's cool. It's always refreshing to hear about managers or leaders or, you know, whoever who truly have other people's best interests in heart. And that's really cool. So wait, so you were at that game? You were at the Saints game?
Yeah, no, I went out. I was at I think I found out I was covering that game at like 9 a.m. and was in the clubhouse at 10:30 and was, you know, there and wrote it, and got the plate of the page somewhere around here.
Oh gosh.
Press. Yeah, so it worked out really well.
That's incredible. All right, let's talk some sports picks, some gambling, the main event type of deal.
Sure.
Just more generally though, who are your teams? You said you're from kind of Cali, the Bay Area. Is that Oakland, Warriors, Raiders type of thing?
Well, as a fan of a certain age, never Raiders. They left. The Raiders left when I was a little kid, and that coincided with the 49ers being like the greatest team in the century. So I'm an A's, Warriors, Niners fan.
Got it. As somebody on our team has mentioned, it's probably very similar. They're from Baltimore, despise the Colts, and are absolutely enthralled with the Ravens because they showed up when he was like 10, and like it was the greatest thing in the world after having your team just like move in the middle of the night with Mayflower moving trucks and like so. Okay, cool. So, and what, as you pick games and you do roundup and all that sort of stuff, what do you enjoy most about it? I'd imagine the least favorite thing would probably be everyone's least favorite thing, which is, hey, I followed your pick. You screwed me up. I lost all this money. So, do you have a favorite thing that you like about it?
My favorite thing about it is that they've never put any limit on what I can write about for the game. Is that like, there's the parameters. I have to give the matchup, I have to give the TV information, and I have to make a pick. And other than that, it's just do whatever you want. And so I've, really gone in weird directions with it. And that the fact that a lot of readers have actually responded to that and like seem almost the weirder I go with it, or the more dismissive I'll be of certain teams. Like people have always seemed to really respond to that. And so that's probably my favorite part, I'd say, is just sort of the agreement from both my bosses and my readership that it doesn't have to be this team is the 6th ranked run defense and they're going against a team with the 28th ranked run game. So like, I mean, sure, sometimes it is that. If I think that's the most compelling part of a game, I'll write a super straight thing like that. I often look for something different. And I also often try to like sort of brush off the super obvious, like, this guy's playing against his former team. I feel like that usually doesn't actually have that much relevance to the game. And you're seeing it in a bunch of other places. So I try to have mine be at least something different, so that if you're reading my capsules, you're going to get something that you maybe didn't get somewhere else, would be my general goal with them. And I mean, my worst isn't strangely enough, my worst isn't people complaining that like I got one wrong. I mean, everybody gets one wrong. Everybody gets a bunch wrong. It's how the picks are evaluated versus how the capsule preview is evaluated, where I could predict a game to a T, like describe exactly what's going to happen, what guy's going to play well, what weaknesses he's going to exploit, how the game's going to go, and my pick is wrong by a half point, and that's a bad pick according to like everyone who reads it. That's a bad pick. You were wrong by half a point, so despite the fact that all this stuff was right, bad pick. But like Steelers Bengals a couple weeks ago, my whole capsule was about how the Steelers were definitely going to win, but I picked the Bengals because I thought the spread was too big. Well, the Bengals won, so that's a good pick. It's like, it's not a good capsule at all. Capsule. Like I couldn't have done worse. But so I'd say that's probably the when we switched to picking against the spread, that was probably is the value of the capsule diminished greatly when we started putting a spread pick. The only thing I hear about now is wins and losses on those picks. And I mean, like there's people like a separate group who read it clearly for entertainment value, but it was interesting to me to see the way my work was evaluated change and have it be so much about that final number that the actual 50 to 200 words I wrote about that game are almost irrelevant. I could have written
meaningless. Yeah. It's just your hard work. It doesn't,
yeah. So that's, I mean, people can feel free to complain as long as they click, but it's definitely like that. That's certainly where I find it the most frustrating. Also, it's just like, that people think that when I make a pick that I'm rooting that way.
Right.
Like, you have no idea or at least I don't think most people would have. I'm always rooting for the 49ers. But outside of that, like, I don't think that there's anything in my matchups where you could really tell what I'm rooting for. But people think like, oh, well, you picked this team to win or even just to cover. Like, and so they're wrong. Oh, I bet you feel like an idiot. You were rooting against them. And I'm like, no, actually a surprising result is good. Like, like I'd much rather be surprised than have my picks be wrong.
Yeah.
I have a couple friends who actually bet every pick I do, which I tell them not to do all the time.
Those are good friends.
But for the most part, I'm like, if I miss, I miss. Like, it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
I'd much rather have it be like, holy crap, I can't believe the Bengals beat the Steelers.
Right.
Than be right about a pick.
Yeah. Yeah. I would agree. And we try and do a lot of that too. We have a weekly article that goes out Tuesday that is right at that intersection. It's a little longer, but it's right at that intersection of like entertainment and actual knowledge. And it's very similar in that respect. Like we'll make a suggestion that certain coaches have to answer to boosters in college. Boosters donate money. They have to know what the spread is, and so like, Of course it's a joke. But there have been some tendencies by some of these coaches. And so, we try and do the same thing too, because it's way too off-putting for us to be a cookie cutter, like, oh, they're 9-5 in all black uniforms and they're wearing black uniform. Like, who cares? Who cares? It's not a data point. Who cares?
Right.
So yeah, we like to have some fun with it. And when you are picking games, what is it that you're looking for? Is there anything in particular that you're looking for? I know you said you like to produce and outwardly face kind of a different blend or a different flavor on the matchup.
Right.
But when you're looking, what are you looking for?
Well, it's I'd say it varies based on the team. That whether there are some teams that I very much believe in at home and don't believe in it all on the road. There are some teams affected by weather. There are some teams affected by the actual matchup. And so with each game, I basically try to figure out what I think each team's strengths are and whether or not those strengths matter against the team they're going against. And then my method is kind of haphazard. I tend to look at a lot of rating services for people picking total points for the teams, and try to just get a really wide variety of them, and then sort of decide, where I think the signal is in that of how realistic I think that is, and then sort of match it up, which is why I like picking against the spread, because I'm much more interested in the difference between the two teams, which I think can vary quite a bit based on just sort of how things go in the game and the timing of the game. And so, I mean, yes, a lot of it does come down to a gut call in the end, but I'd say it starts with data. It starts with, things like legitimate matchups of this is a primarily running team. How good is the defense? And not just looking at yards, like a defense's yards game, like looking deeper into it about the Awesome Football Outsider stats, where it tries to take a deeper look at the actual quality, where you can get beyond just raw yardage totals, because those really aren't all that useful. A team can look like they're great against the run, when really it's just because they're so easy to pass against. That
right.
So I'd say there's a starting point of hard data, And then there's a level of like, okay, well, I need to actually just make the call between, you know, some various options. And there are games where I think it's super obvious the way it's going to go. And I'd say those games I tend to do pretty well in. The problem with picking every game is there are plenty of games where the spread's close enough, or there are so many variables that makes it a lot harder. And it really does just kind of become a guess, which, you know, nobody wants it to be a guess. And you're certainly not starting with it there, but at some point that's what it becomes. And then my fail safe is a guy in the office who's like a mildly degenerate gambler, who I basically just send it to him and tell him to like send me what he thinks the 4 stupidest picks I made are. And so he hits me back with like, these 4 are inexcusable. And then I sort of evaluate whether, and I don't always change based on what he says. But if it's like, it's been proved really valuable because there's a lot of them where it's like, you know, like a Rams Seahawks game where I think it's, you know, really a 50-50 call. And I leaned slightly toward the Rams. And he's like, no way, this is all Seahawks. And if he feels really adamant and I was like flipping a coin, like that's an easy one to iron out. But then there's ones like this week's Packers Titans game. Like I was just 100%. No, the Packers are going to demolish them. This is like not even close.
Yeah.
Though the spread couldn't be big enough.
So
Yeah. And so no matter what he would have said, I would have been like, no, like this is, you know, Packers in the snow at home, don't care. Yeah. And with real motivation, you know, and I think there are some teams that are really affected by motivation and narrative and all those things, and some teams that aren't. The Packers are like super affected by that stuff. Yeah. Where like they've got a chance at earning a first round bye. They've got a chance at earning home field throughout the playoffs. They've got, you know, the Aaron Rodgers proving everyone wrong Olympics. Still. Yeah. And so they're a team that's really bound for that. So that's one where like I'd even throw out, even if when I try to come up with what a predicted score for either team, like even if it came out super close, I'd be like, nope, going Packers. Yeah,
an educated gut.
Yeah,
and that's a good way to do it. It's funny you mentioned the Packers. They are kind of like, first of all, home field at Lambeau throughout the playoffs in January is a different home field advantage than anyone else could possibly have. I remember when I went to Lambeau, it was like negative degrees. It was late December, negative degrees. Aaron Rodgers was out, and here comes UCLA California kid Brett Hundley to take snaps. And I'm like, oh, this is going to get out of hand. And it did. I mean, he could not fathom the cold that was Lambeau. But anyway, I don't want to hype up the Packers too much, but I think you're right. They kind of do have like, it's motivation, but it's also like, there's that thing in Lambeau, and the Patriots had it with Tom Brady, where late in the season, the opposing team feels like they have to do more than their game plan because there's that added dimension of snow or Tom Brady's record at home being, 90-1 or whatever it is. And it forces teams to get out of their characteristics. I think you're exactly right. It's a very storybook type of franchise that they have down there. When you're picking these games, at least in your head, do you prefer to pick the line when it comes out on Tuesday, or are you going to let it settle for a day or two? If you look at a line and say, oh, that is going to get bet up or bet down, I'll wait, or what do you prefer to do? Do you have a preference?
Because of our publishing schedule, I'm sort of forced to write Wednesday morning.
Yep.
and we don't publish them until midnight Thursday. So like 12:01 or whatever. But I'm writing Wednesday morning off of basically I just with what the line where I'm seeing it right then, and sort of as a way to protect myself from overthinking, and to protect myself against I'm not always there. Like when the pick is being seen out into the Sunday paper, I don't even work Saturdays anymore. And so so I basically lock in a pick then and just deal with it.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's great for me. Sometimes I pick against a team and their quarterback gets hurt.
Yep.
And that worked out really well.
Yeah.
But the opposite happens just as often.
Yep.
Where I pick a team like the Lions this week. Their whole coaching staff got ruled out.
Yep.
And I mean, I don't think they were going to beat Tampa Bay. I never thought they were going to.
Yeah.
But I thought they'd keep the game mildly competitive, and I didn't think Tampa Bay needed to show all that much. But the combination of the coaching staff and then Stafford goes out in the first series, and it's like, well, it was like so quick into that game where it was like, well, that one's
change the channel.
Oh well.
Yeah.
But so I basically lock in on Wednesday mornings and just go with it from there. And so, I think that there certainly could be some advantages to reevaluating it later, but I've just sort of to simplify the process have just kept it with that. And it's gone pretty well for the most part. I will occasionally, if something like really ridiculous happens that changes the line a great deal, I'll sometimes go in and note that in the capsule.
Yep.
That hey, just an update is, everybody on this team is out.
Yeah.
And just because I want the readers to have some consistency with that pick, and I want to avoid, the ESPN had a draft expert who used to go back in and change all of his predictions after the fact. And I don't want people to see my pick moving and think that's happening, so I just lock it in and I'll just eat it. I'll deal with it.
Yeah. And you're exactly right though. It comes out in the wash. It totally comes out in the wash. It's a quarterback goes down. The Browns wide receivers don't exist. No matter what you do, you're kind of on either side of it. So it can definitely benefit you to wait, but I think you're just as successful if you just let it ride. So I think a majority of people that we've interviewed have a Tuesday, Wednesday ritual as well. They think that there's more value that they can glean before the public gets a hold of that line and moves it all over the place. So
yeah.
It's an interesting concept. And so aside from spreads, are you doing any sort of totals, over unders, that type of thing, or any sort of other type of gambling, whether it's not gambling, picking, parlays, anything like that?
We list the total points, but I don't pick against them. Just it was a negotiation to be allowed to pick against the spread in the Times.
Really?
When I started the paper, we weren't even allowed to list the point spread.
Wow.
It was considered gauche.
Wow. Because I really think, and you probably have a much better thought process here, I really think in the next few years, you're going to start to see like a column on the side of games that have live betting updates as the game goes along.
Absolutely. It's super increasing. And that's the thing is, so we sort of did baby steps where, we were picking winners. Like we're going way back now, like back to like 2005-ish.
Yep.
We were picking winners with no point spread listed. And then we managed to convince standards that it would be okay for us to list the point spread as an educational thing for readers, just so they have that in their head of like, well, odds makers think that this team is favored by this much, but that we actually had to have a disclaimer. We had to have a disclaimer on the page that said our picks were not made against the spread.
And we
which
would
led
never.
and it led to a lot of confusion too, because a lot of people see the spread and see the pick and be like, wow, you're picking that team to win by 23 points. And it's like, no, I'm not. And then I think it was 4 seasons ago. It was actually a guy in my old department, the art and design department, was basically like, wouldn't it be cool if we did a year of picking against the spread? Like, just try it. Like, we've never done it. Like, the paper's never done it. There's a lot of interest in gambling, and it seems to be going up. And so he brought it to me and my boss, and we went to our standards department and brought it up, and basically got like arms thrown up, like cat's out of the bag, whatever. Go ahead and try it. But then viewership of the column increased dramatically. Like I think it like tripled in the first year. Yeah. And so then it was like, oh, well, and then my old boss was basically like, well, guess what you do all the time now?
Great idea.
Hope you didn't think this.
Do it.
Yeah, hope you didn't think this was a 1-year experiment, because it went really well. And so it's funny because like it's definitely a higher stakes again is like a little weird, especially in gambling. It's like not higher stakes compared to people who are out like losing their rent, but it's higher. The picks used to be 100% entertainment value. It was just writing to be like an entertaining look at what the game was going to be, and like I don't know, the 49ers will probably win. And so it became much more of a strict like work, like taking it more seriously. Where again, my capsules, I don't take anything seriously, but the actual picks, like taking that was a big change. But so as far as like doing other picks is like, at least so far, I wouldn't say they're necessarily ready to go into further picks or more complicated picks. We'll occasionally write about like Victor Mather, who writes for us, will often sort of do like a betting errata, like, story about like weird things that can be picked for the game. And like, they see that as like an entertaining look at the news rather than an outright promotion of the varying levels of gambling. So it's a fine line that so far we've stayed in the clear and they're happy with it. And we'll probably move as time goes on, move that line even farther, but it's, we don't want to shock the system too much. Somebody described it once as the Times is a slow moving ship. And so if you want to make a change at the Times, it needs to be like very small turns that sort of get it going in the direction you want to go. Cause it's a big old company with a lot of employees and a lot of people who've been there for a long time. And, I'm one of the people who's been there a long time now. When I got there, I was the person trying to change everything. And, 15, 16 years later, I'm the one being like, that's not how we do that.
This is the Times.
Yeah. Like there, it turns out I have those lines in the sand too. They're maybe different. They're different than the ones that I was trying to break. And I actually, when new people come in and want to break the rules and they're doing it with like a super smart, savvy, this is a reason I'm doing it. I'm like, oh, cool. Like, right. Like screw it up, whatever. Let's see what happens. Yeah. When people come in and are just like, I don't like that, so I'm not going to do it. I'm like, let me explain to you how you don't do that.
I'd like to introduce you to my friend Red Tape.
Yeah. I will bury you in the red tape.
Oh yeah. Introduction to standards immediately. That's interesting. So, and you pick all the games every week. If you had a choice, would you down select and maybe focus on a couple, or do you enjoy going through the slate of all of them?
Weirdly, I think I've never actually mapped it out. I think if I was doing select games, I would do better. Like the ones I feel stronger about, like I anecdotally believe I would do better, but I haven't actually done like what if I just picked 5 or 10? Like, but I don't want to do that. I think that like, I think if you're going to do it, you go all in. You do it, like, to the point where even like this coming week's game capsules, there will be several where I don't give much of a game preview because it's like between 2 non-playoff teams. And if there isn't some compelling thing about the game, I won't write much about it. But like, it's still like you see it through. Like I'm gonna do a pick for every one of those games, and I'm gonna put thought into that pick. It's not like I just randomly guess it, but I'm also not gonna spend too much time describing like why I think the Bengals will win or lose. I just don't think there's a lot of reader value there. But the picks is like there's a complete set every year, and it's we'll see how it goes. This is my first year of doing it, of the 4 that I've picked against the spread. And, but weirdly, I've been pretty proud of the capsules I've written. Like, I think I've done pretty well. I think there have been a lot of strange factors this year. Home field advantage has been really hard to figure out this year. I mean, it's excuses. It's on me to figure that out. But like if I were to say like, why are my picks worse this year? And I mean, it's not like terrible. I'm still right around 500. But I'd say things like home field advantage was a big thing for me, figuring out which teams it mattered for and which teams it didn't matter for. And I feel like I had a really good sense of that. And this year, none of it matters, or at least it matters. It mattered a lot less in the first like 12 weeks before it started to get cold. Yet now it's a different story.
Totally. We've actually had a discussion internally, and we're talking to someone like yourself who puts out picks, who has a model and recreates his own lines. And what we want to ask him about that is, Vegas used to, up until this year, add 2.5 points for home field advantage, 2.5 to 3 points in all their lines. Does he think that they're still doing that, or is it 1 point now, or what's kind of the thought process there? Because it completely changes a line when, like, if there is no home field advantage built into that line, I now need to adjust. I think it's you're right. It's a very interesting topic that we don't have the answer to. But so, you're doing well, because what we do is, accuracy is important, right? But ideally, this is a long-term thing. And so what our algorithm takes into account is consistency, longevity, which side of the consensus you're on, all these different metrics, not just accuracy, and then ranks you next to your peers of other people who make picks. And so when we look at things like, you're 6-2 when picking the Rams, you're 7-3 when picking the Titans, you're 8-4 when picking the Packers, you're 4-1 when picking the Raiders. I mean, those are really good data points for people looking at your stuff, because you know that team, and whether you choose this week to sit the game out or go on the other side of it is important. Is there anything on those teams that you can think of that is like, oh, I know that team because of X or their scheme or whatever it is?
It's I watch at the very least I watch the condensed version of every game. But there are some teams that I just enjoy watching more, not from a fan standpoint. It's like I'm not enjoying watching the 49ers at all this season. But there are teams that I'd say I definitely watch closer, and I'd say the Titans and the Packers are definitely in that range of teams where I think I probably pay attention more. and pick up more intricacies of them. You know, the more you watch a team, the closer you watch a team, the more you can tell, like, you know, little aspects of them, of, you know, that, like, you know, that Derrick Henry going against the Colts, when the Colts have defensive tackles out, it's like, you know, I just have watched Derrick Henry enough to know he's actually going to go to the outsides. Like, he's not going to go up the middle at all.
Yeah.
And all game he was just going to the outside. And so I feel like I knew that going into that game, just from having really drilled down on watching him play. And, you know, the Rams are a weird one that I tend to do well on. I think I have more faith in the Rams than a lot of people do. Like, Bill Barnwell, just like, I think he hasn't been in a while, but he used to be really hard on Jared Goff. And I mean, I don't think Jared Goff's great. I don't think like, you know, I don't think he's like an Alzheimer's guy.
Yeah.
But he's like always fine.
Yeah. Yeah. He's fine. He's fine. Joe Flacco was fine in Baltimore.
Yes.
And like just had a lights out postseason. And like that's all you need. If you can get into the dance, Jared Goff is good enough to do something like that for the Rams, especially with the talent they have at the other positions, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so they're a team that I think gets underrated. I'd say which shows up all over the place. It shows up it eventually shows up in betting lines just because of how people are gambling on them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'd say they're sort of, they fell out of favor because they lost in fairly embarrassing fashion in a Super Bowl, and then had a letdown season the next year.
Yep.
But the letdown season is like not even surprising, because the way health works in the NFL, if you had a fully healthy season that got you to a Super Bowl, chances are you're going to have health problems the next year, because 2 healthy years in a row is not typical.
Yeah. It's mean reversion. It's it is. It's
So I really look past that and like, and look into like, you know, they really were garbage in that Super Bowl, which is depressing because they were a really fun team to watch that season.
Yes. Very fun.
And so I think, like, specifically with that team, I think it's probably that I think people look past them a little too much, where, you know, the Titans, I think people look past Tannehill. I know he just had a bad game. But in general, I'm a much bigger believer in Ryan Tannehill than most people are, where, again, like, I don't think he's like a top shelf Patrick Mahomes talent, but I think what he is a guy who can take advantage of the box being stacked and can throw over that and stretch the field in an efficient way. Where if he was asked to throw the ball 35 or 40 times a game and lead an offense, I don't know, probably wouldn't work. But he's not being asked to do that. He's being asked to, like, they couldn't seem less similar, but he's playing the Lamar Jackson role, you know? He's not not the running aspect of it, but the throwing aspect of it is everybody's expecting both of those teams to run all the time. And so if you can accurately throw over that stacked box, there's a lot that can be done with that. And he's consistently done it for 2 seasons.
Mm-hmm.
And so I tend to believe in their scoring, because Derrick Henry is such a weird throwback. And is a much different runner than I think people think he is. He's much, much more about breaking outside runs and getting into the secondary than he is about 3 yards in a cloud of dust. He's not Eddie George. He's nothing like Eddie George.
No.
And like, because he's big and strong, I feel like people get the wrong idea about him. He's much more of that big explosive back, and that's creating all these opportunities for Tannehill. So that's like with that team is, I think their offense gets underrated. I think their defense gets overrated.
Totally.
So that can throw them off. So I'm actually surprised I'm doing as well, just because I do think that the hard thing to pick about them is, you know, even if I'm 100% sure they're going to score 40, I'm not 100% sure they're not going to give up 40.
Yeah. So somebody on our team likened Derrick Henry to do you know during games when they bring the mascot out to play the middle schoolers and he's like
Yeah.
stiff farming kids to the dirt?
Yes.
Like, yeah,
Yes.
it's funny. He's and you're right. You're so right about Ryan Tannehill and Lamar Jackson, and like that's part of the reason Lamar Jackson's completion percentage was so high last year was he had one-on-one matchups across the board. Like no one in the NFL had more wide open wide receivers and tight ends than Lamar Jackson did because everyone's pushed up against the line. And Ryan Tannehill, same thing. And he's got some great talent around him. They both do.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's how about if you're going to throw out one kind of fun rule for gambling, like we have in our office, we have a wall of rules that have stemmed from really bad beats or something along those lines. So always bet against an East Coast team going to a primetime West Coast game, or never bet against a coach who has shown a tendency to know what the spread is, because late in the game instead of kneeling he'll punch in a touchdown. If you had something like that, what would you toss out?
One that I think is maybe a little too obvious at this point, but it's something that I believed in strongly, and I feel like I was a little early on, is don't bet on the Chiefs against a bad team. They don't concentrate at all. They show up in the fourth quarter, and I said in one of my wrap ups that they like push the win now button, and just like But I picked the Raiders to beat them, and didn't even pick them to cover. Like said in the capsule that they were going to beat them that first win, and it's because Kansas City wasn't super as well as they were playing. Like they weren't like succeeding on all levels, and the Raiders are like a sneaky good team. The Raiders are okay. Yep. They're like I'll give them like every week they're gonna be okay, and like. So for me, I was just like sure that the Chiefs were going to come in, they're going to fart around for 3 quarters, and then they were going to try to globetrotters their way out of it, and it didn't work because they got behind by too much. They gave up 40 in Arrowhead, and I'd say that holds true from week to week. Is like if they're challenged, there's nobody can beat them. I don't think anybody can actually beat them when they play the full 60 hard. They're incredible. Yep. But I think getting them to do that is kind of hard, and almost the worse the team, the less hard they seem to try. Yeah. Which conserve your energy. If you can win, go Shaq and Kobe Lakers. Just show up for the playoffs, and that's fine. Yeah. But from a especially when they have like a big spread against a team that doesn't stink. That's really what it came down to at that Raiders game. It's like they had a big spread, and it's like, but the Raiders aren't bad, and they're going to come in and just not even try for 3 quarters. Yep. So I'd say that to a certain extent, and then one that like I don't even think is necessarily true anymore, but still is true, super true in my head, is
that's the one we're looking for.
Is don't underrate Atlanta at home.
Yeah.
Like Matt Ryan is like a different guy at home. Is just a different quarterback. And it's like all the old Matty Ice things. Like it's a joke. If you watch Matt Ryan enough, you see him like hit and like explode the ball out, and like he looks like a mannequin who got tackled. But weirdly at home, it's a completely different story. And I think that like probably at least this season has not been true, and maybe wasn't even true last season, but it just sticks there in my head of like, oh, the Falcons are underdogs at home. This is the easiest money in the world, is every time. And I don't think they're good. I don't think that they're, I don't think they're even close to relevant. But every time I see them being an underdog at home, I'm like, well, that's easy one. That one's done.
Yeah, that's easy. They're wearing the ATL jerseys. It's perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm just totally fine with that being irrational.
Yeah, it doesn't need to be. We have one up on the board that says always bet against Tulsa in every sport. And like,
Yeah.
there's no reason for, like, somebody had a bad bet one time and like went up on the board. So we're not looking for rational thought there.
Yeah.
Not whatsoever. Okay. All right. Let's wrap this up. We're going to move to the lightning round. Like I said, one word answers, first thing that comes to mind. And we can just burn through these things. All right.
Cool.
Ready to rock?
I'm ready.
All right. Favorite sports movie?
Bull Durham.
Nice. Least favorite head coach?
Pete Carroll.
Personal best game day experience to date?
The Falcons Patriots Super Bowl.
Name your top 3 bucket list stadiums to visit.
Football, I've been to most of them.
Can be any sport.
Let's see. Wow, this is hard because I tend to travel a lot. With the new Minnesota Stadium, and I know it's a new one, but I've been to it. I would like to go to it. I would like to travel back in time and go to the old Boston Garden. Gosh, this is a good question. Oh, you know what? I've never seen a Seahawks home game. I'd love to see that crowd when the crowds are a thing again.
Yeah, for sure. True or false? Living in New York is a little overrated.
Oh no, true, totally true. Yeah, won't expand on it. I love it, and it's totally overrated.
You must pick one sport to play that will decide some dire consequences. What are you picking?
I'm personally playing the sport.
Mm-hmm. We accepted cornhole, so it's a little loose.
Yeah, I mean, if we could go with video games, then that would be.
Video games work.
Barring. All right, yeah, video games then.
All right. NFL MVP.
Mahomes.
I know. It's boring, but it's right. You know.
Yeah. I mean, I could pick somebody else, but like there are other guys who I think are just as important to their team. But he's going to win, and he's going to be on a minimum of 14 win team.
Yeah.
So it's Mahomes.
Scariest playoff team.
You know, I'd hate to play Miami if they make it.
What is one franchise you most want to see win a championship in any sport?
I'd like the Cleveland Indians to win. I don't care if it's after the name change. Probably better after the name change. But like for that team to get through, it's been a long time, and sort of all the other cursed teams got a chance, and they didn't. So yeah, let's go with them.
Okay. As a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I wanted to work in newspapers.
Coolest sports figure you've met to date?
Coolest? Oh, let's see.
Yeah, most like guy or girl you'd want to like have over for dinner or something.
You know what? I had the hardest time meeting Tom Rathman. I kept calling him Tom Rathman to his face. I was trying to interview him about Frank Gore, and I kept just being like, "So Tom Rathman, I'm sorry I did that." And it happened like 5 times in one conversation. And I'm not normally like starstruck by athletes. I spend a lot of time with them. But Tom Rathman threw me.
That's a great answer. Loudest stadium that you visited, been in, or arena?
Well, it's thrown. Super Bowl crowds are weird. I'd say in a regular season game, because those are better than playoff games. Oracle Arena for the Warriors.
The Roracle. Better New York City sitcom, Seinfeld or Friends?
I think Friends does not hold up well. If you go to rewatch it, it's like the percentage of jokes that are basically like, that person thought I was gay is like very surprising. So I think Seinfeld really holds up quite a bit better. I think that both when I was watching them were great, but Seinfeld holds up better.
I agree. It stands the test of time. Still funny. Choose one GM to build your franchise.
In football?
Yep.
God, I don't even think it's his title. But if I were building a team, I get Prague Mrath, because that guy is a wizard of contracts where the player walks away thinking he got a great deal, and then they do the analysis and they're like, that guy is guaranteed $14 an hour. Like he can be released in week 2 and he will be paid out in Kohl's cash.
Thank you for your service.
Yeah, and it's every one of those contracts is like when like the second week when somebody's really drilled down into it, they're like, that is the worst contract I've ever seen.
All right, Super Bowl matchup and winner.
I think it's gonna be. I mean, it sounds so obvious, but I think it's gonna be Chiefs Packers, and I think the Chiefs are gonna win. I know couldn't be more vanilla.
Yeah, it's play the odds there. They're both pretty dominant. If you weren't creating content for the Times, what would you be doing?
Well, I've long said that if newspapers don't work out, I was going to go into long haul trucking.
Nice. Seriously?
I love driving long distances. I can stay awake like pretty much endlessly. I never get bored doing it. Like I used to just to drive, or where I went to school 6 hours from my parents' house, and I'd like drive down for dinner and drive back. So I think that's where I go.
Fair enough. Yeah. I went out to Frontier Days in Cheyenne, Wyoming one time, and I was like 15 or like 13 or something. And I saw these steer wrestlers, and I made the decision at that point, like, if things just don't go for me, like, I'll just do that. Like, this seems cool. So,
yeah.
So I hear you. All right. Why don't you toss out any places? Obviously, people know where they can find you, but your Twitter handle or anything like that, so they can get to your info.
Sure. Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Ben Hoffman NYT, where I tweet like 80% about TV shows and my family, and 20% about work. You can judge for yourself which is the better of those. Or just, find me every week on New York Times website on nytimes.com.
Excellent. Well, that's that. That's all we have to say about it, I suppose. So thank you so much for coming in, man. This was great. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it was fun.
It was awesome talking with you. I'd love to kind of keep in touch as we go along here and as we grow. And
and just let me know, and I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks,
cool.
Ben.
See ya.
See ya.
Leave a comment below if you have any questions that you'd like to hear us ask some of the best sharps in the business in future interviews. And if you like irreverent commentary, be sure to sign up on SharpRank.com for our newsletter that will show up in your inbox on Tuesday mornings. Also be sure to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and if you're feeling professional, LinkedIn. We'll see you around.